The dust devil spun past Willa Vance as she rode into Bozeman, Montana territory, on a gelding so tired it barely lifted its hooves, and when she dismounted outside the boarding house, the sleeve of her dress caught on the saddle horn and rode up her arm, revealing a maze of white scars that made the livery boy go pale. She yanked the fabric down quickly, meeting his stare with eyes that had seen too much for someone who looked barely 22. The boy swallowed hard and turned away, leading her horse toward water without another word. Willa stood there in the September heat of 1876, her leather bag clutched against her ribs, feeling every eye on Main Street boring into her back. News traveled fast in towns this small, and by supper time, everyone would know about the woman with the scars. The boarding house smelled like lye soap and boiled potatoes. Mrs. Henderson, a round woman with suspicious eyes, took Willa's money and handed over a key without asking questions. That suited Willa just fine. She climbed the narrow stairs to a room that held a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. It would do. Everything would do as long as it was far enough from Kansas City. She unpacked slowly, hands shaking as she pulled out 2 dresses, a brush, and the small pistol she kept wrapped in a handkerchief. The scars on her arms caught the afternoon light. They ran from her wrists to her shoulders, some thin as thread, others thick as rope. She had matching ones on her back and along her ribs. They were a map of a life she was trying to forget, written in pain across her skin. That night, Willa ate alone in the dining room, aware of the other boarders stealing glances. An older man with a tobacco-stained beard. 2 women who looked like schoolteachers. A young couple who whispered behind their hands. She kept her sleeves buttoned to her wrists despite the warmth and ate her stew without tasting it. Morning came with the sound of wagons rattling past and roosters crowing. Willa had barely slept, haunted by dreams that left her gasping. She dressed carefully, braiding her dark hair and pinning it up, then ventured out to find work. She had enough money for maybe 2 more weeks, then she would need to earn her keep. The general store needed help, but the owner took one look at her and said the position had just been filled. The restaurant owner said the same. By noon, Willa understood that the livery boy had indeed spread the word, and whatever people imagined about her scars was enough to make her unwelcome. She was sitting on a bench outside the telegraph office, wondering if she should just move on to the next town, when a man on a tall bay horse rode up and dismounted. He was lean and weathered, maybe 26 or 27, with brown hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water. He wore a dusty black hat, worn chaps over his trousers, and moved with the easy confidence of someone who had spent more time in a saddle than in a chair. He tipped his hat to her. "Afternoon, miss." Willa nodded, not trusting her voice. Men who were polite usually wanted something. He tied his horse and went into the telegraph office. Willa watched the street, counting the businesses, calculating her chances. When he came back out, he paused beside her. "You are looking for work," he said. It was not a question. She met his eyes, defensive. "What makes you say that?" "I have been watching people turn you away all morning. I was in the general store when old man Peters lied about having filled his position." He pulled a tobacco pouch from his pocket and began rolling a cigarette. "I am Nathaniel Vaughn. I run a ranch about 5 miles north of here." "Good for you," Willa said, though her heart had started beating faster. He lit the cigarette and exhaled slowly. "I need a cook and housekeeper. My last one married a miner and moved to Butte. The work is hard. The pay is $30 a month plus room and board. You would have your own cabin, small but sound. I do not care where you came from or what happened before you got here." Willa stared at him, searching for the catch. There was always a catch. Why would you hire someone you do not know? Because you look like you need the work and I need the help. Simple as that. He took another drag. I have 3 ranch hands, good men who know to be respectful. We run cattle, some horses. It is honest work if you are interested. I can cook, Willa said slowly, and clean. I am not afraid of hard work. Figured as much. Nathaniel dropped his cigarette and ground it out with his boot heel. If you want the job, meet me at the livery in an hour. I will drive you out to see the place. If you like it, you can start tomorrow. If you do not, I will bring you back to town, no questions asked. Before she could answer, he walked away, his spurs jingling softly. Willa sat there, stunned. She should be suspicious. She should demand more details. But something about the straightforward way he had spoken, the lack of prying curiosity in his eyes, made her want to trust him. An hour later, she was sitting beside him in a wagon, her bag at her feet, heading north out of Bozeman. The land opened up around them, golden grass rolling toward distant mountains, the sky so blue it hurt to look at. Nathaniel drove in silence, giving her space to think. "Why did you not ask about my scars?" Willa finally said. He glanced at her, then back at the horses. "Not my business." Everyone else wanted to know. Everyone else has too much time on their hands. He shifted the reins. "Miss Vance, I learned a long time ago that what matters is what a person does now, not what happened to them before. If you can cook a decent meal and keep a house, that is all I need to know." Tears pricked Willa's eyes, sudden and unexpected. She blinked them away, turning her face to the wind. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded once, a slight smile touching his mouth. The ranch appeared over a rise, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley with a creek running through it. The main house was built of logs, sturdy and well-maintained. A barn stood nearby, along with a corral holding several horses. She could see cattle dotting the hills beyond. And set apart from the main house, about 50 yards away, was a small cabin with a stone chimney. Nathaniel pulled the wagon up to the cabin and helped her down. "This would be yours," he said, pushing open the door. Inside was one large room with a wood stove, a bed frame with a clean mattress, a table with 2 chairs, shelves on the wall, and a trunk. Simple but comfortable. There was even a rug on the floor and curtains on the window. "The pump is just outside," Nathaniel said. "You would take your meals in the main house, cook there too. My hands eat breakfast at sunrise, dinner at noon, supper at sunset. I do not expect fancy cooking, just food that sticks to a man's ribs. You would have Sundays mostly to yourself, though there is always breakfast to make. Laundry is Mondays." Willa turned slowly, taking it all in. It was more than she had hoped for, more than she deserved. "What do you think?" Nathaniel asked. She faced him, squaring her shoulders. "I will take the job, Mr. Vaughn, and I will work hard for you. You will not regret this." "I did not think I would." He tipped his hat. "Call me Nathaniel. I will introduce you to the hands, then leave you to settle in. Tomorrow at dawn, I will show you the kitchen." The 3 ranch hands were a varied bunch. There was old Pete, who was not actually that old but had earned the nickname by being the wisest, a man of about 40 with kind eyes and a limp from a horse accident years back. Then there was Jack Sullivan, a red-headed Irishman in his early 30s with a booming laugh and a talent for gentling horses. The youngest was Tommy Garrett, a lean kid of 19 who blushed when Nathaniel introduced him to Willa and could not seem to find his tongue. They tipped their hats respectfully and welcomed her. If they noticed anything unusual about her appearance, they kept it to themselves. Willa felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. That night, alone in her cabin, she lay on the mattress and stared at the ceiling beams. Outside, she could hear crickets singing and cattle lowing in the distance. The air smelled clean, like grass and water and freedom. For the first time in 2 years, she felt something that might have been hope, Dawn came cold and clear. Willa, dressed in her work dress and apron, braided her hair and walked to the main house. Nathaniel was already up, building a fire in the big kitchen stove. He showed her where everything was kept, the pantry stocked with flour and beans and salt pork, the root cellar full of potatoes and onions and preserved vegetables. "Make whatever you think is right," he said. "The men are not picky." Willa set to work. She made biscuits and gravy, fried up salt pork and eggs, put coffee on to boil. By the time the hands came in, stomping their boots and hanging their hats, the kitchen smelled like heaven. They ate with appreciation, complimenting her cooking between bites. Nathaniel said nothing, but she noticed he had 2 helpings of biscuits. After they left for their work, Willa cleaned up and started planning dinner. The rhythm of cooking, of useful work, soothed something raw inside her. She kneaded bread dough and let it rise. She put beans on to simmer. She scrubbed the floors and washed the windows. By the time noon arrived, she had a spread ready that made Jack Sullivan whistle in appreciation. "Miss Vance, if you keep cooking like this, we will all be too fat to sit a horse," he said, grinning. "Then you better work harder," she replied, and was surprised to find herself almost smiling. The days fell into a pattern. Wake, cook, clean, cook again, prepare for the next day. It was exhausting and satisfying in equal measure. Willa went to bed each night so tired she barely dreamed, and that was a blessing. The men treated her with respect, never pressing into her space or asking personal questions. And Nathaniel, he was steady as a compass. He said good morning and good evening, complimented her cooking once in a while, and otherwise let her be. But she caught him watching her sometimes, when he thought she did not notice. Not in the way men back in Kansas City had watched her, with hunger and cruelty. Nathaniel looked at her like she was a puzzle he was trying to understand, but one he had no intention of forcing. A week passed, then 2. The leaves on the cottonwoods by the creek started turning gold. Willa's hands grew rough from work, but her shoulders straightened. She was earning her keep honestly, and there was pride in that. One evening, after the men had eaten and gone to the bunkhouse, Nathaniel lingered in the kitchen. Willa was washing dishes, her sleeves rolled up because the room was hot. She had forgotten to be careful. When she turned to put a plate on the shelf, she saw him staring at her forearms, at the scars that crisscrossed her skin like a map of pain. She froze, waiting for the questions, the disgust, the pity. Nathaniel stood up slowly. He crossed to where she stood and looked her straight in the eye. "Your past stays behind that door," he said quietly, nodding toward the entrance. "In here you are just Willa. A woman who makes the best biscuits I have ever tasted and who works harder than anyone I know. That is all that matters to me." Willa's throat closed up. She tried to speak and could not. So she just nodded, tears spilling over despite her best effort to hold them back. Nathaniel reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her shoulder. Just a brief contact, but it was the kindest touch she had felt in years. Then he turned and left, his footsteps echoing across the porch. Willa sank into a chair and cried, really cried, for the first time since she had fled Kansas City. She cried for what had been done to her, for the life she had lost, for the fear that still woke her at night. But she also cried with relief, because someone had seen her scars and told her they did not matter. Someone had offered her grace without demanding explanations. After that night, something shifted between them. It was subtle but real. Nathaniel started staying after meals, helping her clear the table even though it was not his job. They talked about small things at first. The weather, the cattle, plans for the winter. He told her about growing up in Colorado, about losing his parents to fever when he was 18, and working his way from ranch to ranch, until he had saved enough to buy this place 5 years ago. She told him she was from Missouri originally, that she had a brother somewhere but had lost touch. She did not tell him about Kansas City, about the man who had bought her drinks and promised her work and then locked her in a room for 2 years, about the scars he had left on her body and soul. But she sensed Nathaniel could guess enough. October arrived with frost on the grass and geese flying south. Nathaniel and the hands worked long days, preparing for winter, mending fences, bringing the cattle down from the high pastures. Willa canned vegetables, smoked meat, and made sure the woodpiles were high. Old Pete taught her to make a liniment for sore muscles that the men swore by. Jack showed her a tune on his harmonica that made her laugh. Even shy, Tommy started talking to her, telling her about his family back in Ohio. She felt like she was part of something, a community, a family of sorts. It was strange and wonderful. One cold afternoon, Nathaniel came in from mending a fence with a gash on his hand. Willa sat him down and cleaned it, wrapping it with clean cloth. His hand was warm and calloused in hers, strong from years of hard work. "You are good at this," he said, watching her face. "I've had practice," she said without thinking, then bit her lip. He was quiet for a moment. "I am glad you ended up here, Willa." She looked up, startled. His creek water eyes were serious, soft. "So am I," she whispered. His fingers closed gently around hers just for a second. Then he stood, thanked her, and went back out into the cold. Willa sat there, her hand still tingling from his touch, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. That night, she admitted to herself what had been growing for weeks. She was falling in love with Nathaniel Vaughn. It terrified her. After everything that had happened, after all the ways she had been hurt, the idea of opening her heart was like standing at the edge of a cliff. But Nathaniel was nothing like the man who had hurt her. He was patient and kind and steady as stone. He made her feel safe. He made her feel seen, not as a broken thing, but as a whole person worthy of respect. But would he want her if he knew everything? Would he look at her differently if he knew the things she had been forced to do, the shame she carried? The questions haunted her through the harvest season. The first snow came in early November, dusting the world white. Willa stood on her cabin porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the flakes fall. She heard footsteps and turned to see Nathaniel approaching, his breath misting in the cold air. "Beautiful, is it not?" he said, coming to stand beside her. "Yes," she agreed. "Everything looks clean." He glanced at her. "You look cold. Come up to the house. I have something to show you." Curious, she followed him. Inside, the fire was roaring. He led her to the sitting room, a space she rarely entered since her work was mostly in the kitchen. In the corner stood a small tree, no taller than her waist, planted in a bucket of dirt. "I remembered you said once that you loved Christmas," Nathaniel said, sounding almost shy. "I thought we could decorate this together, make the place more festive for the holidays." Willa stared at the tree, her eyes stinging. "You did this for me, for all of us," he said. "But mostly for you, yes." She turned to face him. "Why are you so kind to me, Nathaniel?" He took off his hat, running a hand through his hair. "Do you want the truth? Always." "Because from the first moment I saw you sitting on that bench in town, looking lost and scared and brave all at once, I knew you were someone special. And the more I have gotten to know you, the more certain I have become." He took a step closer. "Willa, I do not know what happened to you before you came here, and I do not need to know unless you want to tell me. But I know that you are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I would be honored if you would let me court you properly. If that is something you might want." Willa's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "You want to court me?" "I do. Very much." His voice was low, earnest. "But only if you want that too. I will not push. I will wait as long as it takes, or I will let it be if you do not feel the same. Your choice, Willa." Always your choice." The tears came then, hot and fast. Nathaniel looked alarmed, but she shook her head, laughing through the crying. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I want that. I want you. I am just so afraid." "Of me?" He sounded heartbroken. "No, never of you." She wiped her eyes with her apron. "I am afraid that when you know everything, you will change your mind." Nathaniel closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He took her hands in his, careful of the scars that marked her wrists. "Then tell me," he said gently. "Tell me everything, and let me prove to you that nothing could change how I feel." So she did. They sat by the fire, and Willa told him things she had never spoken aloud. About the man in Kansas City, a saloon owner named Cyrus, who had seemed charming at first. About how he had offered her a job, then drugged her drink. About waking up in a locked room, one of a dozen women kept prisoner, forced to entertain men who paid Cyrus for the privilege. About the scars, which came from Cyrus's knife whenever she tried to refuse or escape. About the 2 years of hell, until one night when a fire broke out in the building, and in the chaos, she had managed to run. She had stolen a horse and ridden for days, stealing food, sleeping rough, until she had ended up in Bozeman with almost nothing to her name. By the time she finished, her voice was hoarse and her hands were shaking. She could not look at Nathaniel, terrified of what she would see in his face. "Willa," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Look at me." She forced her eyes up. His face was wet with tears. "I am so sorry," he said. "I am so damn sorry that happened to you. And if this Cyrus was in front of me right now, I would kill him with my bare hands." His grip on her hands tightened. "But you listen to me. Nothing you just told me changes how I see you. You are not damaged. You are not less. You are a survivor. You are fierce and brave, and I am in awe of you. But the things I had to do," she whispered, "were done to you, by evil men. That is not on you, Willa, none of it." He lifted her scarred wrist, and eyes on hers pressed a kiss to the inside of it where the worst of the marks were. "These are proof that you fought, that you survived. They are part of your story, and your story is beautiful because it led you here. To me." Willa broke then, collapsing forward. Nathaniel caught her, holding her as she sobbed against his chest. He murmured soft words, his hand stroking her hair, and for the first time in 2 years she felt truly safe. When the storm of tears finally passed, she pulled back, embarrassed. "I have soaked your shirt," he smiled, tender and real. "I have more shirts." She laughed, shaky but genuine. "So you still want to court me?" More than ever. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing away the last of her tears. "If you will have me, I will," she said. "I want that very much." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he kissed her, soft and sweet, a question and a promise all at once. Willa kissed him back, tasting salt and hope, and felt something long frozen inside her begin to thaw. Winter deepened, but inside the ranch house, there was warmth. Nathaniel courted Willa the old-fashioned way, with small gifts and careful attention. He brought her ribbons from town and a book of poetry. He carved her a wooden comb. He asked before touching her, always mindful of her past, and she fell more in love with him every day because of his patience. They decorated the Christmas tree with strings of popcorn and dried berries. On Christmas Eve, Nathaniel gave her a shawl he had bought from a traveling merchant, soft wool and deep blue. She gave him a set of warm gloves she had secretly knitted in the evenings. The hands celebrated with them, and the house rang with laughter and music from Jack's harmonica. On Christmas night, after everyone had gone to bed, Nathaniel walked Willa back to her cabin. Snow was falling again, thick and silent. "Stay," she said at her door, surprising herself. He studied her face. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." She took his hand. "I trust you, Nathaniel, and I want you close." They went inside, and he built up the fire while she lit a lamp. Then he came to her, slow and careful, and kissed her like she was precious. They undressed each other with trembling hands, and when he saw all of her scars, every mark and line, he kissed those two, whispering that she was beautiful, that she was perfect. Willa cried as they came together, but this time the tears were from joy, from the wonder of being touched with love instead of violence. Nathaniel was gentle and patient, letting her lead, and when they finally moved as one, it felt like being remade, like all the broken pieces inside her were being put back together. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the quilts, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Marry me," Nathaniel said into the darkness. Willa's breath caught. "What?" He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. "I know it is fast. I know we have not been courting long, but Willa, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I want to build a life with you, raise children with you, grow old with you. Will you marry me?" She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and sure. "Yes, Nathaniel, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and they made love again, slower this time, sealing their promise. They were married in February 1877, in Bozeman's small church with old Pete, Jack, and Tommy standing witness. Willa wore a new dress that Nathaniel had commissioned from the seamstress, cream-colored with lace at the collar. She did not hide her scars. Nathaniel wore his best suit, and when he took her hands and spoke his vows, his voice was strong and sure. "I, Nathaniel Elias Vaughn, take you, Willa Marie Vance, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to honor you, to protect you, to love you in good times and bad, to remind you every day that you are cherished until death parts us." Willa's vows were simpler, her voice shaking with emotion. "I, Willa Marie Vance, take you, Nathaniel Elias Vaughn, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to stand beside you, to build a home with you, to love you with everything I am, for all the days of my life." When the preacher pronounced them married, Nathaniel kissed her to cheers from the small gathering. They held a celebration dinner at the ranch, and even some of the neighbors came, having heard about the mysterious woman who had won the bachelor rancher's heart. By then, Willa had made friends in town. The seamstress, a woman named Clara, had become a confidante. The doctor's wife, Margaret, often visited for tea. They accepted her, scars and all. That night, in the main house where Willa now lived as Nathaniel's wife, they lay in the big bed that had been his alone for so long. "Are you happy?" he asked, his arm around her. "I did not think I could be," she admitted. "After everything, I thought happiness was something that happened to other people, but you proved me wrong." "Good," he said, kissing her forehead, "because I plan to keep proving you wrong for the next 50 years. She laughed, then turned serious. "You really want children?" "After what I told you, after what was done to me." "Only if you do," he said, "and only when you are ready. There is no rush, Willa. We have all the time in the world." But as it turned out, time had its own plans. By April, Willa realized her courses had stopped. By May, the doctor confirmed she was expecting. She was terrified at first, haunted by fears that her body was too damaged, that something would go wrong. But Nathaniel was steadfast, and so was she. She let Margaret and Clara fuss over her, ate the foods they recommended, rested when she needed to. The pregnancy was not easy. She was sick for the first 3 months, and the last month she could barely walk without her back aching. But through it all, Nathaniel was there, rubbing her feet, bringing her tea, reading to her in the evenings. On a cold January morning in 1878, after a long and difficult labor attended by the doctor and Margaret, Willa gave birth to a son. They named him Samuel Nathaniel Vaughn, and when the midwife placed him in Willa's arms, she wept at the miracle of it. This child, born from love, proof that her body could create life as well as survive trauma. Nathaniel held them both, his face alight with wonder. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect." "We made him," Willa said, still amazed. "Out of love." "The best things always are," Nathaniel replied. Samuel was a healthy baby with a powerful set of lungs. Those first months were exhausting, but Willa had never known such joy. Watching Nathaniel with their son, seeing the big rancher reduced to gentle cooing, made her fall in love with him all over again. Old Pete whittled toys. Jack sang Irish lullabies. Tommy, now 21 and courting a girl from town, was an honorary uncle who could always make the baby smile. The years rolled on, each one better than the last. In 1880, Willa gave birth to a daughter, Grace, who had her father's creek water eyes and her mother's determination. Samuel adored his little sister, trailing after her protectively even when he was barely for himself. The ranch prospered. Nathaniel expanded the herd and bought more land. Willa's reputation as a cook spread, and she sometimes catered events in town for extra money, though she did not need it. She just loved the work, loved being known for her skill rather than her scars. The scars themselves faded over time, becoming thin silver lines, a part of her but no longer defining her. She wore short sleeves in summer without shame. When people asked, she said simply that she had survived something difficult, and Nathaniel would put his arm around her and that would be enough. In 1882, Jack finally married the widow Henderson's niece, a cheerful woman named Rose, and brought her to the ranch. She and Willa became fast friends. Tommy married his sweetheart, Lily, and they built a house in town where he worked at the livery, though he still helped out at the ranch during busy seasons. Old Pete, getting on in years, spent more time teaching Samuel to ride and telling the children stories than doing heavy labor. But he was family, and no one would hear of him leaving. In 1884, Willa and Nathaniel welcomed another child, a son they named Thomas, for Tommy, who had become like a brother to them both. This birth was easier, and Willa recovered quickly. She was 31 now, strong and content, with a family she had built from nothing. One evening that summer, with the children asleep and the ranch quiet, Willa and Nathaniel sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. "Do you ever think about Kansas City?" Nathaniel asked. It was a question he rarely posed, but sometimes it came up. Willa considered. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not the way I used to. I used to think about it with fear, with shame. Now, when I remember, I mostly feel grateful." "Grateful," he sounded surprised, "that it led me here, to you." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I would not have come to Bozeman if I had not been running. I would not have been sitting on that bench the day you rode into town. I do not believe things happen for a reason exactly. But I do believe we can make meaning from even the worst things. And the meaning I made was this life with you." Nathaniel raised her hand to his lips, kissing her scarred wrist as he had that first night. "I love you, Willa Vaughn." "I love you, Nathaniel Vaughn." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out, the night sounds of the ranch a familiar symphony. Inside, their children dreamed. Around them, the land they had built a life on stretched wide and beautiful. And in Willa's heart, there was peace. The years continued to be kind. Samuel grew into a tall, serious boy with a gift for understanding horses. Grace was wild and joyful, always covered in dirt from helping her father with the cattle. Little Thomas was quieter, thoughtful, with a love for books that Willa encouraged by reading to him every night. In 1886, when Willa was 33, she realized she was expecting again. This pregnancy was a surprise, but a welcome one. In the spring of 1887, she gave birth to twin girls, Anna and Emma, identical except for a small birthmark on Anna's shoulder. The house was chaos and laughter, and Willa thrived in it. Nathaniel, now 37, had silver threading through his hair, but he was as strong and steady as ever. He expanded the ranch further, hiring more hands, building a bigger barn. He became a respected figure in Bozeman, serving on the town council and advocating for better schools and roads. But his favorite role was still father and husband, and he never missed a chance to tell his children stories or steal a kiss from his wife. Old Pete passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1889, and they buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch he had loved. The whole community came to mourn a good man. Samuel, now 11, cried openly, and Nathaniel held him, teaching him that it was all right for men to grieve. Life was not without its challenges. There were hard winters that killed cattle, dry summers that threatened the crops, accidents and illnesses that tested them. But they faced everything together, the family and the ranch hands who had become family, and they always came through. In 1892, Samuel turned 16 and started courting a neighbor's daughter, a sweet girl named Abigail. Willa watched her son, now nearly as tall as his father, and marveled at the passage of time. Grace, at 12, was already talking about becoming a veterinarian, a dream Nathaniel encouraged even though it was unusual for a girl. Thomas, at 8, was teaching the twins to read, patient and kind. Anna and Emma, now 5, were a whirlwind of energy and mischief. One evening, Willa and Nathaniel snuck away from the chaos of the house to walk by the creek. It was June, the air warm and sweet with the smell of wild roses. "Can you believe it has been 16 years?" Nathaniel said, skipping a stone across the water. "Since what?" "Since you showed up in Bozeman with scars you would not explain," he grinned at her. "And I said your past stays behind that door," she laughed. "Best words anyone ever said to me." "I am glad I said them." He pulled her close. "Though I am even more glad you eventually explained. And that you married me, and gave me these beautiful children, and built this life." "We built it," she corrected. "Together." "Together," he agreed and kissed her as the creek burbled and the sun set and their children's laughter carried from the house. The turn of the century came. Samuel married Abigail in 1897, and they gave Willa and Nathaniel their first grandchild, a boy named Nathaniel Samuel, in 1898. Grace, defying convention, went east to study animal medicine at a progressive women's college. Thomas showed a talent for business and started helping his father with the ranch accounts. The twins, growing into beautiful young women, were inseparable and full of plans to travel the world. Willa, now in her late 40s, had lines around her eyes and silver in her dark hair, but she had never felt more content. Her scars were faded now, barely visible, and when she looked at them she no longer saw pain. She saw survival. She saw the journey that had brought her to Nathaniel, to this life. In 1901, they celebrated their 24th wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch. The whole community came. Jack and Rose, now with 4 children of their own. Tommy and Lily, expecting their third. Neighbors and friends, old and new. Samuel and Abigail with little Nathaniel toddling around. Grace, home from her studies, regaling everyone with stories of her adventures. Thomas, now a confident young man of 17, squiring a girl named Catherine around the party. Anna and Emma, 14 and full of life, dancing with the young cowboys who worked the ranch. As Willa stood on the porch watching the festivities, Nathaniel came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Happy," he murmured into her ear. "So happy I could burst," she said, leaning back against him. "Good. Because I plan to keep you this happy for the next 24 years, and the 24 after that." She turned in his arms. "That is a lot of years, Nathaniel Vaughn." "Not nearly enough," he said, and kissed her. The years that followed were full and rich. Grace completed her studies and returned to Bozeman, becoming the first female veterinarian in Montana Territory. She married a fellow veterinarian in 1904, a kind man named David, and they opened a practice together. Thomas married Catherine in 1905 and took over more of the ranch operations as Nathaniel began to slow down. The twins, after finishing school, did indeed travel, spending 2 years seeing the country before returning home to settle down, Anna marrying a teacher and Emma a journalist. Samuel and Abigail gave Willa and Nathaniel 4 more grandchildren. Grace and David had 3. Thomas and Catherine had 2. Anna had twin boys, which made everyone laugh at the family pattern. Emma had a daughter. The ranch house was always full of the sound of children, and Willa loved every minute of it. In 1910, Nathaniel turned 60. He was still strong, but he had earned his rest, and he let Thomas run the day-to-day operations while he spent his time with his grandchildren and his wife. He and Willa took long walks, sat by the creek, and reminisced about the years that had passed. "You remember the first time you kissed me?" Willa asked one afternoon, nestled against him on the porch swing. "I remember thinking I was the luckiest man alive," Nathaniel said. "I remember thinking I did not deserve you. And now I know better," she smiled. "I know I earned this happiness, and so did you." He kissed the top of her head. "We certainly did." In 1914, Willa turned 61. Her children threw her a grand birthday party, and she was surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Nathaniel had built. Looking around at all the faces, the children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren now, she felt overwhelming gratitude. That night, in the quiet of their bedroom, Nathaniel held her close. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For taking a chance on a dusty cowboy all those years ago, for trusting me with your heart, for giving me the best life I could have imagined." Willa felt tears prick her eyes. "I should be thanking you. You saved me, Nathaniel." "No," he said firmly. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to land." "Then thank you for that," she whispered. "For giving me a home, for loving me, for making me believe I was worthy of love." "You always were," he said. "I just helped you see it." They fell asleep tangled together, as they had for nearly 40 years, and Willa dreamed of blue Montana skies and a future that stretched bright and endless ahead. The Great War came and went, touching even their distant corner of Montana. One of Samuel's sons enlisted and came home safely. Thank God. The ranch adapted, as it always had, selling beef to feed the troops, contributing to the war effort. Willa organized supply drives in Bozeman, and Nathaniel was proud of her community leadership. In 1920, women got the vote, and Willa cast her ballot with tears in her eyes, thinking of the girl she had been, broken and scared, never imagining she would live to see such a day. Grace stood beside her at the polling station, and they held hands as they made their marks. The 1920s brought prosperity and change. The ranch was now one of the largest in the region, run by Thomas with help from Samuel and Grace's husband David. Nathaniel, now 70, was content to advise and spend time with Willa. They had 14 grandchildren and, as of 1923, 6 great-grandchildren, with more on the way. Their 50th wedding anniversary in 1927 was a massive celebration. The whole town turned out. The children arranged for a photographer, and the family portrait taken that day showed 4 generations, over 60 people, all connected to the love story that had started with a scared woman on a bench and a cowboy who had offered her grace. At the party, Nathaniel stood and raised a glass. 50 years ago, I married the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. She had been through hell, but she did not let it break her. Instead, she built a heaven right here on earth, for me and for our children and for everyone she has touched. Willa, my love, you are the reason I wake up grateful every morning. Here is to 50 more years. Everyone cheered, though they all knew 50 more years was unlikely, but that was all right. They had been blessed with the years they had. Willa stood too, her hand in Nathaniel's. She was 74 now, her face lined, her hair white, but her eyes still bright. I came to Bozeman with nothing but scars and fear, she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. And Nathaniel told me my past could stay behind the door. He gave me the freedom to become who I was meant to be. Everything good in my life, everything beautiful, came from that moment of grace. I have been loved beyond measure, and I have tried to love the same way in return. Thank you all for being part of this journey. There was not a dry eye in the house. In 1929, Nathaniel fell ill. It was his heart, the doctor said, worn out from a long, hard working life. He was 79, and though he fought, they all knew he was tired. Willa stayed by his side, holding his hand, talking to him about their years together. I am not afraid, he told her one evening, his voice weak. I have had the best life a man could ask for. Do not talk like that, Willa said, though her own heart was breaking. You are not leaving me yet. Not if I can help it, he smiled. But Willa, if I do, I need you to know something. What? You were the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children and this life we built. I would do it all again exactly the same. So would I, she whispered. I love you, Nathaniel Vaughn, I always will. And I love you, Willa Vaughn, in this life and whatever comes next. He rallied for a few weeks, strong enough to see each of his children and grandchildren, to hold the newest great-grandchild, to sit on the porch one last time and watch the sunset over the mountains he loved. And then, on a quiet October evening in 1929, with Willa beside him and his family gathered close, Nathaniel Elias Vaughn closed his eyes and slipped away peacefully. Willa was devastated, but she was not destroyed. She had loved and been loved, and that was enough to carry her through. They buried Nathaniel next to old Pete on the hill, and the whole community mourned a good man, a fair employer, a loving husband and father. Willa lived on, surrounded by her family. She moved into a smaller house on the ranch property, insisting that Thomas and Catherine take the main house. She spent her days with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, about the ranch, about the long journey from pain to joy. In 1935, on a warm June day, Willa was sitting on her porch when she felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest. She was 82 and she knew what it meant. She managed to call for Grace, who was visiting, and her daughter came running. "Mama, what is wrong?" "It is my time, sweetheart," Willa said, surprisingly calm. "Do not fight it. I am ready." Grace, tears streaming, helped her mother inside and onto the bed. She sent for the others, and they came quickly. Willa's children gathered around her, and she looked at each beloved face. "I am so proud of all of you," she said. "You have given me such joy. Promise me you will take care of each other." "We promise, Mama," Samuel said, his voice breaking. "And remember," she said, her voice growing fainter, "that no matter what happens, love is always worth it, always." "We will remember," Grace promised. Willa smiled. "Good. Now, I think I am going to go find your father. I have missed him." Those were her last words. She closed her eyes and her breathing slowed. And as the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Willa Marie Vaughn slipped away, her hand held by her children, going to join the man who had loved her past her scars, past her pain, into the fullness of joy. They buried her beside Nathaniel on the hill, and the whole community came to mourn and celebrate a remarkable woman. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, and the story of Willa and Nathaniel became a family legend, told and retold to teach about love, about grace, about the power of looking past the surface to see the soul beneath. And on warm summer evenings, when the family gathered on the porch of the house Nathaniel had built, they could almost feel the presence of the two who had started it all. A woman who had survived the unthinkable, and a man who had seen her scars and loved her anyway, building a legacy that would outlast them both. The ranch still stands today, a testament to what can grow from seeds of kindness planted in broken ground. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Willa and Nathaniel dance together still, their love story complete, their happy ending earned and eternal.